and place some other views in here. Now another very important features are barriers. To create a barrier, we right click on the layout, go to help us, add vertical barrier or horizontal barrier. We choose the vertical one and we don't see anything in the layout itself, but down here we can see that it created this barrier. And now we can take some views, for example our two text views, and drag them inside this barrier. And as you can see now this line here appeared. This is our barrier, but it's set to the left side, so we change barrier direction to right or end. And now it's to the right side of the two text views that are inside this barrier. We can constrain our button to this barrier. And now when any of our two text views grows, it moves this barrier, and together with it the button also moves. When we make the other text view even bigger, it moves the barrier further away. So this is pretty much the same as the guideline, just that its position is defined by other views in it, and not by the barrier itself. This is particularly useful if you support different languages, where the same word can have different sizes in different languages. It's also important to note that the barrier doesn't create a nested view. Instead it just has this constraint referenced IDs attribute, which has a list of views that it contains. So a barrier doesn't decrease performance as a nested view would do. Now by default the barrier also takes gun widgets into account. So when I put this text view here and set its visibility to gun, our barrier is still positioned at this gun text view here in the middle, as you can see. Now we can change this behavior, so our barrier will move to the other text view and ignore the gun text view. For this let's switch over into XML and we add the attribute barrier allows gun widgets, this one here. And when we set this to false and go back into the design tab, we can see that the barrier moved all the way to the left. And if you want to create a minimum position for this barrier, you can also put a guideline in here. We talked about guidelines in detail in part 3. And then put this guideline into the barrier. And now when we remove this text view here, our barrier is placed where the guideline is.